Today it was cold. Hell, it was always cold. I basically lived at the North Pole. Well, I guess you could say I lived here. I didn't really live anywhere. My entire life had been white, full of fluffy snow and icicles, or at least I think that had been my entire life. I honestly didn't know where I was born, but I assumed it was somewhere around here, maybe even in the polar moon pack. I had the same pale white skin as everyone else who was a native to the area. My hair was ghostly white as well, but that wasn't necessarily a trait that everyone around here shared. Regardless, this part of the world was all I could remember. It was around noon now, which meant I better get my ass moving if I wanted to hunt down a good meal like a deer or elk. I guess some people might think that life as a rogue could be romanticized with all of the freedom and lack of rules and such, but really it was a lot of dirt, sweat, and elk blood. Sure, there were rogue packs. I guess I technically ran with one, but it was like the third group of rogues that I'd associated with over the past 10 years. I was fine being alone, most of the time. I wouldn't say my social skills were exactly up to par, and I didn't particularly care for being around most men. There was just something about men that didn't sit right with me. Not that I wasn't attracted to men, I was, but they were frightening to me and I could never sort out why. That being said, no average male wolf could shake me to my core as much as an alpha. Of course, I'd never been anywhere near an alpha, but the fear of accidentally trespassing onto the polar moon pack territory was something I was anxious about every single day. Suddenly, I was torn from my thoughts at the sound of a twig cracking in the distance. Wasting no time at all, I shifted into my wolf form. Bones began to crack within me as they reorganized themselves in my wolf's body, and white fur sprouted from my skin, making my pale blue eyes gleam a bit brighter. As soon as my wolf was in control, my instincts were on fire. I instantly located where the noise had come from and took off in that direction. I wasn't a very big wolf, but I was stealthy as hell. I could sneak up on and take down a full-grown elk by myself with ease. Zooming in and out of the trees, my eyes finally focused in on my target. Unfortunately, it wasn't an elk, but a large male deer stood before me instead. I could definitely handle this. He was apparently nervous, sensing the fact that he was being stalked. His head flickered back and forth, and he didn't move his feet an inch. Before he could decide to bolt, I sprang out from behind a tree and pounced onto his back. I immediately bit deep into his neck and ripped out the flesh around his jugular, assuring he wouldn't live. He fought back, of course, thrashing his antlers around in protest, but as his blood spurted out of his neck, his energy soon faded. After the fucker finally died off, I grabbed his neck in my jaws again, and began to drag him back to the cave that I had been holing myself up in recently. Although my fire from last night was still burning hot, there was no point in shifting back to clean and cook the deer when my wolf was perfectly happy picking him clean with her teeth. I finished off my meal in no time at all and decided it would be a good idea to make my way down to the nearest stream that wasn't frozen. I had blood all over my white fur from my kill, and if I didn't try to rinse it off soon it would surely stain. I wasn't a conceited bitch who was obsessed with her appearance, but the idea of blood stains on my fur didn't exactly suit me either. It didn't take long to make it to the stream. I stuck my head in the water and let the cold droplets slide through my fur. This managed to rinse most of the blood out, thankfully. I sat for a moment at the edge of the stream to groom myself before I headed back to the cave. About halfway back, I decided I'd take a longer way around, so that my fur had a chance to dry out. I wasn't planning on shifting back to my human form this evening because it was much easier to stay warm when you were a furry wolf with a body temperature of around 101 degrees. I hadn't ever taken this route before, but it was very pretty. The trees seemed to have more ice on them in this part of the forest, and the snow was a little deeper. I darted between the trees, allowing my wolf to fully stretch out her legs for the day. Running was a huge part of our life, and we loved it. The deeper snow did slow us down a bit, but it certainly didn't ruin our mood. As I made my way up a hill, I caught the scent of something. It must have been my fire. I had to be getting close to the cave by now, so surely I could smell the fire from here. I sped up my pace, really wanting to get back to my warm cave. The winds had gotten gustier as the day went on, and my damp fur was causing me to shiver a bit. Just as I could see my cave in the distance, I got the wind knocked out of me by something large and powerful slamming into my body. I yelped as my snout went straight into the ground, and my legs came out from underneath me. It was only then that I realized the scent I had picked up wasn't my fire after all. In fact, the scent of my actual fire had mingled with this foreign scent, which caused me to let my guard down. It was another wolf, perhaps 2 or 3. He was a very large wolf, much bigger than me, and he was strong too. He had me pinned in the snow when I saw a man in his human form step out from behind a nearby tree with a set of clothing in his hands. When the man got within an arm's length of us, the wolf on top of me shifted into his human form and quickly slipped on the clothing that the other man offered him. Before I could react, one of the men slipped a collar around my throat, causing me to yelp and cry in pain. It was made of silver. "It's a damn rogue," one of the men muttered. They were both very tall men with a considerable amount of muscle. They had pale skin just as everyone in this region did, one man with light mousy brown hair and the other with blonde. The other man chuckled darkly. "Damn trespassers," he growled. It had been almost a decade since the pack's war with rogues had ended. We were a peaceful group now, never wanting to start trouble, but I must have wandered onto Polar Moon Pack territory. Was this a joke? I always tried so hard to keep within my known boundaries. I should have known taking a different route back to the cave was a bad idea. Even though I meant the pack no harm, alphas always took trespassers seriously. No one, even if they were just from a different pack, was allowed in another pack's territory without notice and permission. The blonde man began pulling the chain connected to my collar as they dragged me back to their pack. Unfortunately for them, I wasn't the type to tuck tail and submit. I growled loudly at them and thrashed around against the collar, trying to ignore the pain. The silver was already burning away some of my flesh and it hurt like hell. The pain was steadily draining my energy, and I honestly didn't know how long I could put up a fight. The man simply laughed at me and tugged on the chain again. This time, an involuntary yelp escaped my mouth. The pain was excruciating. I couldn't keep up the fight right now. My energy was dwindling and fighting only caused the collar to burn deeper into my skin. "I wonder what the alpha will have us do with this one," the other man hissed. They chuckled with each other as if my life were some kind of joke. Sadistic motherfuckers. Despite all their chuckling, it was one word that nearly made me faint right then and there. Alpha. Were they seriously going to take me to their alpha? Oh goddess no. Alpha Elijah was known as the Cold One, and I had never intended on finding out why. I never wanted to be within a mile of any alpha, but especially not him. My heart was pounding in my chest and anxiety coursed through my veins. The true panic didn't set in until I noticed a massive, white building just a few yards away. Was this their pack house? It had to be. It rose beneath the trees, appearing as a snowy castle. I was mesmerized for all of 2 seconds before I remembered these awful men were about to do who knows what with me once they presented me to their alpha. Instead of going all the way to the massive white building, the men took a sharp turn, causing the collar to dig into my flesh again. My energy was non-existent at this point, and it was a miracle that I was still up on all fours. They threw open a couple of metal doors protruding from the ground and began dragging me down a set of stairs. It was dark, cold, and damp down. I didn't like it one bit. The only light was from several oil lamps burning in the corners of the cellar. Other than the 2 men and myself, the room was empty. There were bars that formed cells, but I was apparently the only prisoner. How did I manage to be the Cold One's only prisoner? The men tossed me into a cell and hooked my chains to something. I didn't know what it was, as I was too busy suffering. "Shift," the mousy brunette commanded. I whimpered, knowing good and well I barely had the energy to shift. That, and it would be extremely painful with this silver collar. Not to mention, once I shifted, these bastards would have the pleasure of seeing me naked. Shift, damn it. Fucking rogue. The man growled, kicking me in the stomach. I yelped as I collapsed in the corner. I had never felt so weak and defeated in my entire life. With the little bit of energy I had left, I finally convinced my wolf to shift back to my human form. She didn't like the idea of letting me take on all this pain, but we were running out of options. The shift was painful and left me laying naked and cold on the damp cellar floor. I wouldn't cry. I would not cry. Lena Moretti didn't cry. As I was trying to collect my thoughts and push through the burning pain around my neck, I heard another set of footsteps come down the stairs. I was suddenly overcome with the sweetest smell. It was like spicy oranges with a hint of vanilla. What could possibly be emitting such a beautiful fragrance in such a foul place? It took every bit of strength I had to lift my head and look over towards the stairs. My eyes made contact with another set of golden, amber eyes that almost seemed to shine in the dim room. He had pale skin, just like the rest of us, and fiery red hair. His facial hair was short and well-groomed, and he towered above the other two men in the room. His large frame and toned muscles radiated a unique kind of dominance. "Alpha Elijah," the men said in unison, bowing their heads. "No fucking way." I felt my body begin to shake as the man who I now knew as the Alpha, the cold one, approached me at a rather fast pace. He then completely caught me off guard. He kneeled next to me and stared deeply in my eyes, causing my wolf to go wild, begging to take over again. What the hell was her problem? His large, golden eyes were so full of emotion. Was that worry I saw swirling around his pupils? He turned his head to face the men, his soft expression turning into one of pure hatred. "What the hell did you do?" He screamed at them, his deep voice echoing off the walls. The men looked completely stunned. I mean, I was pretty confused too. What the hell was going on? The Alpha was mad at them for arresting a trespasser? My wolf would absolutely not stop thrashing around within me, begging for my attention. I was trying my best to ignore her so I could take in the situation unfolding before me, but she was being incredibly persistent. This was completely unlike her. Before I had the chance to figure out what the hell my wolf wanted, Alpha Elijah turned back to face me, his eyes softening again. He reached out to brush my cheek, and I involuntarily flinched. What the hell? Why was he trying to touch my cheek? He smelled delightful, and I had all sorts of conflicting emotions coursing through my body, but I sure as hell didn't want an alpha touching my face, especially not while I'm chained up in his cellar. Slowly, he retracted his hand and gave me an understanding look. "My mate," he started. "Wait, what? What did they do to you?" he whispered. My wolf howled in my head, and I finally understood why she had been so insistent on me paying attention. "Our mate? He exists? Our mate was an alpha? The alpha? Shit." The alpha and I stared at each other for quite a while. I didn't know what to say to him, and he was desperately awaiting my response. He took our time in silence as an opportunity to look me up and down, taking notice to the injuries his men had inflicted. I guess he got tired of waiting for me to speak, so he turned back to his men. "Both of your titles are revoked until further notice," he yelled. Titles? These fuckers had titles? Geez. I guess I shouldn't have expected any less. Although, I would admit I was curious as to what titles they held. The two men stared at their alpha, stunned at his words. "Are you deaf? Go," the alpha shouted at them. The men quickly scurried to the staircase and exited the dungeon. If I had any strength left in my body, I would have flipped them off as they went. The alpha let out a frustrated sigh and then turned his attention back to me, his eyes softening as they made contact with mine. "I'm so sorry, my mate," he said softly. "May I ask your name?" He was so gentle and polite, it was really throwing me off. He was an alpha after all, wasn't he supposed to be cruel and demanding? I didn't know if I even wanted to answer him. Of course, I didn't. He's an alpha, so I stared at him. He furrowed his eyebrows together in worry. I mean, I must have looked like hell by now, and I wasn't speaking. He probably thought something was seriously wrong with me. He looked genuinely concerned, and I almost felt bad for refusing to talk to him. "Why won't you talk to me?" he asked, his voice truly revealing his unease. "Please. I won't hurt you, little mate. No more harm will come to you." I sighed in defeat, as I wrapped my arms tighter around my naked body to conceal myself from him. He was just being too nice. That didn't mean I trusted him, but simply that I couldn't deny him answers any longer. "Lena," I squeaked out. "Goddess." I sounded just as weak as I looked. That silver collar had really taken a toll on my entire physical state, and now I just seemed pathetic. I was ashamed of myself but too tired to really show it. Honestly, I felt kind of bad for him. The big tough alpha probably thought he had a sweet, innocent she-wolf for a mate. He sure as hell was in for a surprise. The alpha's worried face softened as he smiled sweetly at me. His teeth were perfectly white and straight, and his smile reached his golden eyes, causing them to gleam. "Lena," he murmured to himself pleasantly. My wolf let out a soft, pleased growl in my head. She liked the sound of our mate saying my name. "I'm Alpha Elijah, but it's just Elijah to you," he told me, his smile never faltering. He reached up and ruffled his own hair with one hand as his smile turned into a childlike sideways grin. Even I had to admit it was kind of adorable. "You know, I've been searching for you for years. I can't believe I finally found you." "I only wish it had been on better terms," Elijah admitted. His cute grin quickly faded, and now he was left looking a bit like a sad puppy. "Look at our mate. He looks so sad. He feels terrible that we're hurt," my wolf whined. I internally groaned at my wolf. Normally, our thoughts and opinions were one and the same, but now that we'd met our mate we just weren't seeing eye to eye. We don't even know him. "You need to chill," I replied to her. "He's our mate. He's our other half, he would never hurt us," she whined. Goddess, she had become so whiny in such a short amount of time. Deciding to ignore my wolf again and turn my attention back to Elijah, I nodded at him. Poor man, he had been searching for his mate for years, and he ends up with a rogue. At least part of him had to be disappointed. My lack of communication must have really been making him nervous, because he finally stood up and walked to the other side of the cold, underground room. He flipped on a light switch that was hidden in the corner, and I noticed two large doors. Elijah pulled the doors open, grabbed something, and then made his way back towards me. In one hand he held a large knit blanket and in the other a small vial. So, this was partly a dungeon, and partly a storage area? The alpha kneeled in front of me again, and unfolded the blanket, wrapping it around me before I could object. "I'll get you some clothes once we get to the pack house. This is medicine. It's kind of like an antidote for silver. It just speeds up our healing time," he told me as he twisted off the lid and held the vial out to me. I glared at him. Was he trying to drug me? He immediately noticed the look I was giving him, and he frowned again. My heart ached just the slightest bit at that frown. What the hell? What's wrong with me? I meet my mate, and suddenly I'm caring how an alpha feels. "Please drink it, Lena. I want you to get better," Elijah pleaded. "Drink it." My wolf hissed at me, "Goddess." What a pushy little bitch she had turned into. I let out a quiet, but agitated sigh as I grabbed the vial from him and poured it down my throat. It tasted of berries. Elijah smiled at me again, and before I had a chance to react he scooped me up into his arms, wrapped the blanket tightly around my body, and began to carry me towards the staircase. I growled lowly in my throat. This was not okay. I would not be carried around like a child. Unfortunately, I couldn't do much to protest. The medicine he had given me was already making me feel slightly better, but I was still too weak to fight against this cocooned blanket and his strong alpha arms. He shot me a confused look when he heard my growl. "Please let me take care of you, Lena," he pleaded softly as he made his way up the stairs and out of the cellar. He kicked the doors closed behind him, and made his way towards the massive pack house. "You're my mate, and you're hurt because of my men. I just want to care for you and make it up to you," he explained, sounding mildly frantic. "We're mates, you should know how much you mean to me. You're my world now, little mate." Part of me wanted to be offended because he kept calling me little. I knew I was short and extremely thin, but I was also strong and independent. I wanted to snap at him to correct him, but somewhere deep inside I decided he wasn't belittling me. Goddess, this mate bond was going to try its damn best to break me down and make me sensitive. "You don't even know me," I finally whispered in reply. His face was a jumble of emotions now. I'm sure he was thrilled that I spoke to him again, but I know my response hadn't been one that he was hoping for. "But I want to," he said, staring into my eyes. "And that doesn't matter nearly as much as this mate bond that we share." I sighed again. What was I even going to say to him? I'd be lying if I said I couldn't feel the strong tug of our mate bond as well, but I couldn't let him in so easily just because he's my mate. My mind and my heart, and my wolf, of course, were in full-fledged battle with each other. I decided to take another look at Elijah now that we were in the light. He was very pale, just like me, but light freckles appeared to decorate most of his skin. His hair was red, but not in a bright orange, gingery way. It was a gorgeous color actually, kind of like a rusty, fire red. He was quite tall and strong, like all alphas must be, but not overly bulky. And his eyes, those were the real killers. That golden amber color appeared molten in the outdoor light. Other than our mutually pale skin, we looked nothing alike. My hair was nearly as pale white as my skin, and my eyes were very light blue. I looked like I'd never been outside a day in my life, which was ironic considering my rogue lifestyle. I took my eyes off him for a moment to study my surroundings. Everything was covered in snow or ice, just like I was used to, but the buildings that surrounded us were stunning. The pack house looked like a white, wintry palace with silver accents. There were windows everywhere, and I could only imagine what the inside would look like. Several smaller buildings stood on the perimeter of the pack house. I'm not sure what they were used for, but they were gorgeous as well. The architecture was so intricate, I felt like I was in some sort of fairy tale. Ripping me from my thoughts, Elijah pushed open the large, stained glass double doors at the entrance of the pack house and carried me inside. Pack members were everywhere, and most of them stopped and stared curiously at their alpha. I'm sure they could smell that I was a rogue, yet no one said a word. Elijah didn't even seem fazed by their obvious interest. Instead, he began to walk up a spiral staircase with silver railings. I'm not sure how many floors we went up because all the spiraling was really screwing with my head, but several minutes later he stopped in front of light gray door and began to dig around in his pocket with his left hand. He put the key in the door, unlocked it, and carried me inside. "Welcome home, Lena," he said as he smiled sweetly at me. I concluded that this was the alpha's wing of the pack house. It was basically like a large apartment inside the building, but was decorated very similarly to the rest of the place. Light wooden floors stretched the entirety of the wing except for the kitchen and bathrooms, which were decorated in white marble instead. All of the walls were a rather unique shade of white. It sounds boring, but with the brightness of the snow streaming in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they made the entire place feel like a winter wonderland. Elijah carried me back to what I assumed was his bedroom and sat me down on his king-size bed. It was covered in thick, plush blankets that made me feel like I was sitting on a cloud. Elijah started digging through his drawers before moving over to his walk-in closet. I saw him grab a t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants before walking back over to me. "I hadn't expected to find you, so I wasn't prepared," he admitted with a shy smile as he handed me the clothing. "I'll get my sister to find you some clothes, or she could even take you shopping sometime soon if you'd like." Sister. Shit, it had never even occurred to me that alphas had families like normal people. I mean, I obviously wasn't the family type since I never remembered having one, but part of me had always longed for that kind of connection. "The bathroom is right over there. You can change and get cleaned up if you'd like." "I'd help you, but I have a feeling you won't let me," Elijah said with a small chuckle. He was absolutely right, though. I held the blanket tightly around my body and waddled towards the bathroom with the clothing clutched to my side. I quickly washed off in the shower after I figured out how to work the fancy contraption, and then I stepped out and changed into Elijah's clothes. They smelled of him, which I actually didn't mind. His scent of warm vanilla and citrusy oranges was intoxicating. I walked out of the bathroom and stared at him cautiously as he sat on the edge of his bed, patiently waiting for me. He greeted me with another toothy smile. "What can I do for you, Lena? Do you need anything? Should I try to contact your family and let them know that you're safe?" he asked, his voice speeding up as he became increasingly eager to please me. "I don't have a family," I answered plainly. Elijah raised an eyebrow at me in confusion, but apparently decided not to pry me for information right now. "Are you hungry?" he asked, changing the subject. I stood there silently for a moment, fiddling with the ends of my wet hair. I was definitely hungry, but should I accept food from him? My wolf growled at me again, forcing me to accept his offer. I nodded to him in reply. Elijah beamed. "Come, let me cook you something." This time I was the one furrowing my eyebrows in confusion. Holy hell, alphas know how to cook. I had always assumed the almighty, arrogant sons of bitches had hundreds of servants to wait on them hand and foot. Then again, Elijah seemed to be breaking that preconceived notion in every way. The alpha grabbed my hand gently and began to lead me back down the hallway. I couldn't ignore the sparks erupting across my palm from the first skin-to-skin contact I had with my mate. I gasped softly and yanked my hand out of his just as we turned to walk into the kitchen. He looked disappointed at the loss of my touch, but he didn't say anything. Elijah simply motioned for me to sit on one of the bar stools before making his way towards the refrigerator. Now, he started with a goofy grin. "What would my little Luna like to eat?" Luna? Shit. That hadn't even crossed my mind. The alpha of the Polar Moon Pack was my mate, and that made me a rogue, their Luna. After I got over the shock of Elijah calling me a Luna, he went on to make me chocolate chip pancakes with a side of bacon. I told him to surprise me after growing tired of him badgering me about what I wanted to eat, so this was what he decided on. I'll admit, I was intrigued. As a rogue, we commonly ate fresh kills for meals, but when we came together as a group somewhere and cooked in our human form, our breakfasts typically only consisted of meats and eggs. The bacon, I was familiar with, but I don't think I had ever had pancakes before. Oh, not to mention it was now dark outside and he just cooked breakfast foods. Do normal people actually do that? He was so odd, especially for an alpha, but I honestly felt like that was in my benefit. Elijah was actually a really good cook, and he seemed pleased when I scarfed down the meal he prepared without argument. I thought after I finished eating he would maybe let me go to bed and have some alone time to process this new situation. But no, he insisted that I meet his family. "I'm a rogue, your family is not going to approve," I told him, feeling my bold personality resurfacing. "You are not a rogue anymore," he said to me, a hint of anger in his voice. He didn't like that I kept calling myself that. "And my family will love you because you're my mate. Please come meet them, Lena. They're so excited that I've finally found you," he pleaded. I let out an annoyed groan, feeling defeated. Why did he have to have this effect on me? Stupid mate bond. "Fine," I muttered. Elijah's golden eyes lit up with joy, and he gently took my hand again, leading me out of the alpha's wing and into another part of the massive pack house. We finally arrived in front of a door to what I assumed was the wing for the former alpha and Luna. My stomach felt like it was in knots. I was not a nervous person, but meeting a former alpha, who could very well be old-fashioned, and set in his ways and opinions, didn't set very well with me. A rather scrawny man who had definitely never been an alpha answered the door and bowed his head to Elijah and I before leading us down a hallway. This wing actually appeared to be bigger than Elijah's, which seemed kind of odd to me. Shouldn't the alpha have the largest wing in the pack house? I hear them. They're here. A female's voice squealed in excitement. Although it was not the voice of a child, she was younger and definitely not Elijah's mom. Did he have siblings? That would explain the large wing. Elijah and I rounded the corner and entered a living area. I was immediately greeted with tight hugs from two females who I assumed were Elijah's mother and sister. I froze in shock, both because I had never met these people before, and I was just not the touchy-feely type. Sensing my discomfort, they both let go and backed away, facing me with wide smiles. Elijah stood behind me chuckling. "Lena, this is my sister, Daphne, and my mother, Diana," he told me. I put on my biggest, friendliest smile for them, surely looking dumb as shit. "Hi Lena. Oh my goddess, I am so excited my brother found you. Like, he was so miserable without a mate. He's getting old, you know," his sister, Daphne explained to me. She had an extremely bubbly, preppy personality that deeply contrasted mine, but her friendliness was likable. Daphne stood a little taller than me, from her alpha genes no doubt, and had the same beautiful, rusty red color hair as Elijah and his entire family. Her hair was long, thick, and silky. It fell all the way down to her thin waist. She was petite, but curvaceous in all the right places. I had a feeling that she would be the perfect mate of a highly ranked wolf one day. Daphne's skin was pale and freckled, just like the rest of her family, but she had a concentration of freckles on her nose that dispersed down across her cheeks. Unlike Elijah, she had emerald green eyes that were large and welcoming. She wasn't super young, but not quite my age either. I'd guess she was somewhere in her late teens. "It's nice to meet you too," I finally replied to her with a smile and a nod. "Oh Daphne, calm down, you're going to scare her," Elijah's mother, Diana said. She basically looked like an older version of Daphne. They had all of the same features, except Diana had the tiniest silver streaks in her hair from age, and her hair only fell to her shoulders. She had a lovely smile, and I could imagine her having once been a very kind Luna. "Welcome to the family, darling. We're so happy to have you," Diana told me, her warm smile never faltering. For an alpha blood family, they sure were nice. Behind the two women I noticed two men sitting on the couch. One was older and obviously the former alpha, and the other looked slightly younger than Daphne. Seeing that I noticed them, the two men stood and approached me. The younger man approached me first. He looked like a much younger version of Elijah, except he had the same color eyes as his mom and sister. His facial features were also softer than Elijah's. I estimated that he was a few years younger than Daphne. "Hey, I'm Kenneth," he told me, reaching out and grabbing my hand into a handshake. I shook back with a strong grip, determined to show him that I too was fierce. "It's a pleasure," I said with a nod. The older man, obviously Elijah's father, stepped forward and gave me a light hug. He seemed quite jolly for a man who used to be an alpha. He was a carbon copy of Elijah, only older. They shared the same golden eyes and everything. "It's truly a pleasure, Lena. I hope you feel happy and welcome here," the man told me. "My name is Donovan, but you can call me Dad," he said with a wink. It was a nice gesture, but I highly doubted I'd be calling him Dad. I really appreciated Elijah's family being so open and welcoming towards me, but I wasn't used to having a family. I would remain on first-name basis with each of them. Diana and Daphne ushered me towards one of the couches, and Elijah sat down next to me. It was a large living room full of comfortable furniture and a fireplace that was lit in one of the corners. The rest of the family took their seats on other couches and chairs that lined the living room area. I knew they were curious to ask about me, but Elijah had probably already warned them that I was a rogue and had no family via his mind link. "I can't wait to take you shopping, Lena. You'll have the best wardrobe of any she-wolf in the pack," Daphne squealed. I laughed lightly. "I'd like that," I replied to her. I wasn't often around groups of wolves, so this was a social adjustment on my part. Elijah held my hand lightly, and I decided not to object. "Do you know what pack you're originally from, dear?" Donovan asked me. I shook my head. I'm assuming this one, but I don't remember my childhood, I told him honestly. Elijah raised an eyebrow and seemed uncomfortable with my response. We don't need to talk about all of that right now, Elijah mumbled. I had a feeling he didn't like not being the first one to learn new things about me. There was an awkward silence for a few minutes that caused me to shift uncomfortably in my seat. I was never the best with social situations, but especially not in ones where others were eager to get to know me. There wasn't really anything to know. We're having a pack dinner tomorrow night in your honor. Daphne finally spoke up. Her voice squeaked a bit, revealing that she was letting me in on a secret. Diana and Elijah scowled at her for ruining the surprise. That's very nice of you all, I told them with a smile. I didn't deal with surprises very well, so I was actually grateful that Daphne had broke the news. Of course, dear, we must introduce the pack to their Luna. We've waited a long time for you, Diana said reassuringly. Yeah, we didn't think you existed, Kenneth said under his breath. I laughed a bit at his comment. I admired honesty. Daphne scoffed at her younger brother, Kenneth. She shrieked, visibly appalled. What? I'm just saying. Elijah has been searching for his mate for 5 years with no luck. Now we know it's because she was a rogue, Kenneth said with a shrug. He wasn't insulting me at all. I knew that tone and demeanor. He was a blunt, honest soul just as I was, and I respected that. Daphne and Diana looked offended, and Elijah growled lowly at his brother. It's fine, I reassured them with a small smile. I've always been around this area, but I have indeed been a rogue for as long as I can remember. Kenneth smiled back at me, thankful that I understood him. What do you like to eat, Lena? Like Daphne said, we're having a dinner for you in the pack dining hall tomorrow night. Donovan spoke up again. I shrugged. I'm not a picky eater. Whatever you all like will be fine with me, I told them sincerely. It was hard to be a picky eater when you lived life as a rogue. Elijah grabbed my hand tighter as he stood from the couch and nudged for me to stand with him. Well, we will be seeing you all tomorrow night then, he said. It seemed as if his family embarrassed him. Excuse me, Daphne piped up. I will be seeing Lena tomorrow morning because we're going shopping. Elijah laughed and nodded before looking at me. Is that okay with you? He asked. I nodded with a small smile. We then said our goodbyes and made our way back to the Alpha's wing. Daphne seemed like a genuinely friendly girl, and I was dying to have some clothes of my own. Although I wasn't exactly the girly type, shopping tomorrow sounded awesome. I was thinking a lot about Elijah's family as he led me back to his bedroom. I still wasn't really sure about all of this, but they seemed like very nice people that I could easily get along with. As we entered his large master suite, Elijah froze and turned around to face me. I've only intended for us to share a bedroom. There's a guest room, but it hasn't been prepared for you at all, he told me with worried eyes. I swallowed and took a deep breath. So I'd be sharing a bed with my mate. That couldn't be too terrible, right? We hadn't known each other long, but I knew Elijah seemed like a respectful man who wouldn't try to make me uncomfortable. He was my mate, after all. We were supposedly made for each other. That's fine, I mumbled as I made my way to the other side of the bed. I slid under the covers and practically melted into the luxurious mattress. This was heaven. Then again, anything was better than sleeping on the ground. Elijah slid into bed as well and turned off the bedside lamp. He reached for my hand under the blanket, but I could tell he so badly wanted to hold me. I sighed lightly and intertwined my fingers with his. This mate bond was surely going to be the death of me. My heart had softened in such a short amount of time. The day had taken a toll on me, and I fell asleep quickly. I sensed that Elijah fell asleep quickly as well. It was probably a mix of exhaustion and content from us finally being united with each other. To me, the mate bond had always been such a skeptical concept, but now it was hard to deny its existence. I slept quietly for who knows how long. I was always a heavy sleeper. Shit would really have to hit the fan to wake me up from a deep slumber. Then, as if it felt my sense of ease and security, a horrid dream entered my mind. It seemed so real, but I couldn't explain why. A man, he was yelling at me. He told me I was a piece of shit, I was unworthy. So many profanities directed from me slipped through his lips. Who was this man? What had I done to him? He was a stranger, yet so familiar. His yelling and harsh words were beginning to affect me. My body began to flail in my sleep. No. I screamed, jolting upright in the bed. Tears were streaming down my face as my mind was filled with both confusion and terror. I rarely ever dreamed. Even when I did dream, they never took this much of a toll on me. I never cried, yet in this moment I couldn't control the sobs that escaped my lips and the tears that flooded the sheets beneath me. My screams and sobs must have woke up Elijah immediately because I felt a large hand grab my arm, so I turned around quickly in fright only to find him sitting up next to me, staring at me with large, worried eyes. I tried to steady my breathing. I didn't want my mate to see me like this. Hell, I didn't want anyone to see me like this. What happened? What's wrong? Elijah asked frantically. He tried to pull me into his comforting embrace, but I resisted and pulled away. A dream. Just a dream, I mumbled to him. It was only a dream, so why couldn't I make myself calm down? Elijah's wide, golden eyes looked hurt that I rejected his attempt to comfort me, yet he remained calm and understanding. What was the dream about? He asked. I don't know. I told him honestly. There was this man yelling at me and trying to hurt me, but I have no idea who he was or what was going on. It felt so real, I added. Elijah nodded to me, showing his concern and understanding. Do you like hot chocolate? He asked. I furrowed my eyebrows together in confusion. What? He smiled and stood from the bed, holding his hand out to me. He wanted me to take it but wasn't going to force me to. Why was he so nice? I sighed but finally obliged, allowing him to intertwine his fingers in mine once more. He led me down the dark hallway and into the kitchen that I had only briefly seen earlier. It was a gorgeous kitchen, not that I'd seen many to compare it to. The cabinets were white and the countertops marble. It was stocked with every appliance you could imagine, all stainless steel. Elijah motioned for me to sit down at a small table in front of the window, so I did. He moved towards the pantry and refrigerator, which I noticed were stuffed full of more food than I knew existed. My mother always made homemade hot chocolate for me or my siblings if we had a nightmare, he told me with a smile as he pulled sugar and cocoa powder from the pantry. You don't have to go through the trouble, Elijah. It's the middle of the night, I said. Nonsense. You're my mate, and it's my job to make you feel better. I know you're not comfortable with our conversations or physical contact yet, so this is the only way I know how to comfort you, he said with a shrug and a shy grin. I watched intently as he placed a pot on the stove and began to mix his ingredients. Only some rogues had actual homes, and I had been inside very few. All of the ingredients and the utensils he used had me intrigued. Elijah must have noticed my curiosity because my observations were interrupted by him chuckling. Have you never had hot cocoa? He asked as he stirred his ingredients. I shook my head, feeling a little embarrassed. Simple things that most saw as a normal part of life, I had never seen or experienced. Even when I ran with the rogue packs, resources were scarce. Before any more could be said, Elijah poured his mixture into 2 mugs, threw a few white puffy things on top, and walked over to me. He sat 1 mug down in front of me before taking his seat, and sipping his own. I picked up my mug and sniffed it. I wasn't picky, I was just curious. It smelled of sweet chocolate. Of course, Elijah had told me it was called hot chocolate, but you can never be too sure. I took a small sip, careful to not burn my tongue, and a smile lit up my face. Good? He asked, smirking at me. It is, thank you, I told him. Although, the white puffy things were now melting, and I still wasn't sure what they were. Don't laugh, I started. But, what are these? I asked, pointing at the white objects floating at the top of my mug. Elijah laughed at me again and I scowled at him. those are marshmallows. Don't ask me what's in them because I have no idea. I just know they're amazing and pair perfectly with hot chocolate, he said with a wink. I nodded and we both continued to drink our hot chocolate. A warm feeling was filling my stomach, and surprisingly, I did feel calmer. After both of our mugs were empty, Elijah placed them in the sink and escorted me back to bed. I managed to sleep soundly the rest of the night in a chocolate-induced coma. The next morning, I awoke to an empty bed, so I decided to take advantage of the situation and stretched my small body across the entire king-size bed as much as I could. As I moved around, I noticed a small white card tumble off Elijah's pillow. Lena, I've gone to tend to my daily work as Alpha. I promise I won't be gone long today. Daphne will be coming by to take you shopping around 10. Rest well, my little Luna, and have a good day. Love, Elijah. I caught myself smiling at his note and quickly wiped the smile from my face. Damn it. I really needed to get a hold on myself. Yes, he's a nice guy, yes, he's my mate, but we just met and know nothing about each other. For all I know, the nice guy routine could be an act. I looked over at the clock and noticed that according to Elijah's note, Daphne should be showing up any minute. I scrambled out of the big-ass bed and ran into the bathroom in a quick attempt to look presentable even though I didn't have any clothes of my own yet. Just as I finished pulling my hair into a side braid, I heard a light knock at the door. Lena, it's me. Come out, when you're ready. Daphne called through the door, her high-pitched voice just as bubbly as it had been last night. I cursed under my breath and rolled my eyes as I took one last look at myself in the mirror. This would have to do for now, but I really looked disgusting for someone who was going to be a Luna. I rushed out the bedroom door to join Daphne and forced a wide smile as I made eye contact with the gorgeous redhead. Daphne seemed like a really nice girl. I'm sure we would get along, but I couldn't deny that our personalities were polar opposites. Several hours later we returned to the pack. It seemed like it took forever to drive to the human town and back, and then the shopping itself felt like an eternity. I was ecstatic to have some new clothes, and some personal items of my own, but I didn't have a fucking clue about fashion. Honestly, I just let Daphne pick out most of the clothes for me. I tried on whatever she handed me, and if it fit, we got it. She said we were using Elijah's card, and that his instructions were for me to get anything I wanted. Once I was back upstairs in the bedroom, I began to put away my clothes on the empty side of the closet. Elijah must have had someone clear out a spot for me. I slipped the shirts and dresses on hangers and folded the pants and more personal items into drawers. The fact that Daphne made me get dresses made me cringe. I had never worn a dress in my life, and I'm pretty sure I'd hate every second of it, but I'm a Luna now. I have to look nice under certain circumstances. I knew leggings and t-shirts wouldn't suffice for all events. Unfortunately, just as I'd put away the last of my new clothing, I heard the bedroom door open. I poked my head out of the closet and saw Elijah looking down at me in amusement. Have a good day shopping? He asked with a smile. It was different, I told him truthfully. I was still trying to refrain from my profanities around him and his family. I was trying to make a good first impression, although I'm not sure why I cared. They're all going to have to accept the real me eventually. Rowdy, independent, and a self-proclaimed badass. Elijah nodded. Don't forget, we have to attend the pack dinner in a couple hours, he reminded me. I let out an annoyed sigh. Elijah furrowed his brows. What's wrong? Do you not want to go? He asked, sounding concerned. This is just a lot of shit to take in, I mumbled in reply. Elijah sighed and walked over to the bed, sitting down on the edge of it. I know. I'm sorry, Lena. I know you didn't ask for any of this, but you're my mate, you're my world. My family and the pack are so excited you're here too. I know it's all completely different than the life you're used to, but I really think you will be happy here if you give it a chance, he told me with a weak smile. I crawled out of the closet and moved to sit on the ottoman in front of the bed. But how long is the kindness going to last, Elijah? How long? When will all the rules and expectations be thrown upon me? When will you show your true colors and forcefully mark me? Or beat me? Or force me to have your pups, I started, my bluntness bursting through for the first time. Elijah just stared at me. His face paled, and his eyes dimmed. Lena, he started, his voice weak. I don't really know where all of that just came from, but I promise you with everything I have, that I would never hurt you in any way. Yes, there are rules in this pack and expectations for a Luna, but I will never force anything on you. I want to mark you, mate with you, and have pups with you one day, but not until you're ready, he told me. I didn't have anything to say now. The look in his eyes told me that my words hurt him, yet here he was, basically proclaiming his love for me, his mate. I'm such a bitch. How did someone like me get paired with someone like him? Lena, I would rather let you walk out that front door and live in agony without you than do something to hurt you. All I want, all my family wants, is to love you and make you happy, he added. I stayed seated on the ottoman, looking down at my fingers as I twiddled my thumbs in my lap. I didn't know if I could trust or believe him yet, but I still felt bad for what I had just said. Our mate bond was tugging at my heart right now, making me feel like shit. Even my wolf was growling at me in my head. I couldn't bear to look in his eyes, knowing they were filled with hurt that I caused. Without looking at him, I nodded, stood up and walking back to the closet. What should I wear tonight? I asked him, desperate to change the subject as I slid hangers back and forth. Elijah stood up as well and joined me in his massive, walk-in closet. Nothing you'll be uncomfortable in. It's just a packed dinner, he told me with a small smile. Elijah reached out and shuffled through my clothes with me. He paused for a moment, pulling out a blue, long-sleeve blouse that was casual, but nice at the same time. He then moved to my drawers and continued his rummaging until he found a pair of black leggings that were a bit nicer than my traditional leggings. Here, this will look beautiful with your eyes, he said, holding the clothes out to me. He still had a small smile on his face. Goddess, what did I do to deserve such a kind mate? I scurried into the bathroom and changed into the clothes Elijah picked out, suddenly trusting his judgment. I brushed out my hair and retied my side braid so that it was neater before searching through the bathroom drawers for the little bit of makeup that Daphne had picked out for me. I reached for the concealer and mascara and applied them lightly, surprised that I even know how the hell the products worked. Another female rogue had taught me years ago about makeup, but I hadn't applied any since then. When I re-entered the bedroom, I found Elijah dressed in a blue button-up that matched my shirt and gray slacks. I couldn't deny that he looked sexy. My wolf was purring in my head, forcing me to admit it to myself. I granted him a smile and took his hand, knowing it would make him happy, before we made our way downstairs to the dining hall. As we entered the dining hall, I was stunned yet again by the beauty of this pack house. The floors were white marble and the walls were a shade of light gray. The mahogany tables were lined up in long rows with one table at the far end of the room in front of the windows. Elijah led me to the table that sat off on its own. It was clear to me now that this was the alpha's table. He pulled out my chair for me, and I sat down without any objection. I vowed not to give him any more attitude tonight since I'd already offended him once today. We were soon joined by the former Alpha and Luna, Diana and Donovan, and then Daphne and Kenneth. Diana and Daphne beamed at me, clearly excited that I hadn't run for the woods yet. Two other couples joined us a few minutes later, but I wasn't sure who they were. Lena, this is my beta, Eli, and his mate Scarlett, Elijah told me. The couple smiled and waved at me from the other side of the table. Eli had dark brown hair, bright green eyes, and pale skin, while his mate, Scarlett, had white blonde hair and blue eyes, just like me. Although we shared those features, our faces were nothing alike. She was absolutely stunning. Next to them is my gamma, Isaac, and his mate, Brooke, Elijah added. The couple heard their names and looked over our way, greeting me with a smile and a wave just like everyone else. Isaac and Brooke both had chestnut brown hair and stunning green eyes. They were both gorgeous and almost looked like they could be related, but I knew the moon goddess wasn't foolish. Right as Elijah finished his introductions, Omegas began to pour out of the kitchen with trays of food balancing on their hands. They were clearly Omegas, but it was nice to see that they all looked clean and content. Many packs abused those of lower standing. Our table was served first. We were each given a plate of grilled, seasoned salmon with shrimp and a variety of vegetables and potatoes. My mouth was watering, but I certainly didn't want to be the first one to dig in. "Can I have your attention please?" Elijah said, his voice loud enough to echo through the dining hall. "Tonight, we eat as a pack in honor of finally finding my beautiful mate, your Luna, Lena," he announced before looking down at me. He gently took my hand and tugged at me to stand from my chair. I obliged, feeling my cheeks turn red. I wasn't one to blush, but I also wasn't used to so much attention. The entire pack whistled and clapped in my honor. Elijah soon allowed me to sit back down, so I went straight for my food. I don't think I'd ever seen such a meal in my entire life. At least, not that I could remember. I heard Elijah chuckle at me as I hastily cut into my salmon. "Do you like it?" he asked. His eyes were back to their bright golden color. I nodded and continued to shovel food into my mouth. I'm sure in that moment, I didn't look like the perfect Lady Luna the pack had hoped for, but I didn't care. This food made my taste buds come alive. Just as I popped another shrimp into my mouth, I noticed someone hovering behind me. I quickly chewed and swallowed my food, before turning around. Hovering was fucking rude. Elijah spun around at the same time as me, and we both laid eyes on a gorgeous she-wolf with curly auburn hair and violet eyes. I was confused. Who the hell was this and why was she hovering over me? "Well, you must be the Luna," she said with a smirk. Her tone was not friendly. "My name is Kayla," she told me. Her entire expression was the essence of pure bitch. "I'm sure no one has bothered to tell you this, but before you showed up, I was going to be Luna. In other words, I think you're in my seat," she hissed, her bitchy smile never fading. I began to see red, my wolf begging to take control. Elijah was our mate, I was the rightful Luna. How dare she? I could hear Elijah yelling at the whore, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. My temper was about to fully erupt. "Listen bitch," I hissed in return. "This is my mate, and my pack, so unless you want to get your prissy little head ripped off, I suggest you get the fuck out of here. I may not be sure how I feel about being in this pack, having my mate, and being Luna, but I sure as hell wasn't going to be insulted by a whore." Her mouth hung open as she absorbed my words, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me. "Tell her, Elijah. Tell her about how I was being trained to become your Luna." Kayla shrieked. "Enough, Kayla. Leave," Elijah shouted. Until now I hadn't heard him use such a serious tone. "No, I'm going to take what's mine. Just wait. I'd make a better Luna than some rogue any day." I was seething. Her final words were enough to completely set me off. I jumped up from my chair, pushing it back behind me, and prepared to attack. My body set itself into a fighting stance, ready to shift if necessary. Just as I was about to lunge at the bitch, a streak of red hair intercepted me. Confusion interrupted my anger for a moment as I took a step back just in time to see Daphne punch Kayla square in the jaw. "Don't you dare talk to my family like that," Daphne growled as she proceeded to backhand Kayla. I knew I liked that girl. My anger faded into pure astonishment. Part of me wanted to be angry that Daphne had stolen my fight, but I was too impressed to be mad at her. Daphne's bubbly personality almost made me forget that she had alpha blood in her veins. Kayla finally accepted her defeat and picked herself up off the ground. I glared at her as she stormed out of the dining hall clutching her cheek. Everyone took their seats at the table again, trying to act like nothing happened. Daphne shot me a smirk as she sat back down next to Kenneth, and then we all continued our meal in silence. The joyful mood that originally surrounded the dinner was now completely thrown off, and I knew Elijah and I were going to have a talk once we were alone. I wouldn't make a scene in front of his family. I needed to know why that bitch insisted that she deserved to be Luna. Had Elijah given up on finding me? I may still be unsure about the whole mate situation, but that thought hurt. Dinner was soon over and everyone made small talk before heading back to their appropriate wings for the night. Elijah and I walked back in silence. Was he scared of me now, or did he just know that I was still pissed off? Surely a manly alpha like himself wouldn't be afraid of any she-wolf. Perhaps he was just disappointed in my actions. I really didn't care either way because I was the one who deserved answers. As we entered the alpha's wing, I went straight for the living room, knowing Elijah would follow. I sat down on his plush sofa and crossed my arms, looking up at him with a cocked eyebrow. Care to explain why that bitch seems to think she deserves my place? I asked, no longer caring about maintaining a verbal filter. Elijah let out a long sigh before sitting down next to me. He ruffled his hair, seeming frustrated, but as usual, he approached me with a calm demeanor. Of course, Lena, you deserve to know, he started. I searched for you for 5 years. Every pack needs a Luna, it makes them stronger. After 5 years I became discouraged. I searched every pack for my mate with no results. My family thought it might be a good idea to have sort of a competition. Any female of age in the pack could participate, and the idea was to find the she-wolf with the most skill, he explained. I thought the idea sounded ridiculous. The participants also met with me several times to see if I liked any of them on a personal level. Kayla was one of the most skilled she-wolves in the competition, and she and I actually became friends. Elijah continued. I gasped and narrowed my eyes at him. How could he be friends with such a cunt? This didn't make her Luna, though. The rules said the winner of the competition could become Luna if she did not find her mate, and I did not find mine. Within the next 4 years, Elijah told me, ignoring my reaction. I scoffed at him. I can't believe you were going to give up on finding your rightful mate. Better yet, I can't believe you became friends with such a rude bitch. I scolded, raising my voice at him. Lena, she wasn't like that during the competition. She was a completely different person. When news spread of me finding my mate, finding you, she went crazy. She's been warned that if her behavior doesn't improve, she'll be thrown out of the pack, Elijah told me as he stared deeply into my eyes, showing me his sincerity. His beautiful gold eyes made it so hard to be mad at him, but I had to resist the mate bond. Or I'll just kill her if she tries another stunt like that, I said with a shrug. Lena, you will do no such thing, Elijah warned. Until you are marked and go through the Luna initiation ceremony, I can't protect you from all of my pack's rules. Murder is a very serious offense here. I laughed, although I found none of this humorous. Oh, there we go. Now you can hold that over my head to scare me into letting you mark and mate me. With my last statement, I witnessed Elijah's eyes dull yet again. He looked hurt. No, Lena. I told you before, all of that will only happen when you want it to. I'm just warning you to try and control your temper right now so it doesn't get you into trouble that I can't completely get you out of. I sighed and looked away from him. Goddess, why did he have to be so nice? Even when I threw accusations at him, he responded with a calm, caring tone. How did he come to be known as the cold one? Fine, I retorted, deciding to end the discussion. I had my answers. Elijah smiled and reached out to me. He brushed his large thumb over my cheek, and I saw his golden eyes sparkle again. I flinched beneath his touch, but quickly settled down as the sparks of our mate bond danced along my skin. Oh, my little Lena, he sighed. When will you begin to realize how much you mean to me? He asked, but I knew it was a rhetorical question. Elijah glanced over at a nearby clock and smiled. I'd say it's about time for bed. We've had a more eventful day than I planned, he chuckled. I nodded and allowed him to lead me to the bedroom. He went to get a shower, so I used that time to change into more comfortable clothing and untie my braid. I slipped under the blankets and felt my eyes grow heavy fast. Elijah reappeared from the bathroom in nothing but a pair of boxers, which woke me from my half-asleep state. Elijah chuckled at me as he joined me under the thick blankets. You don't have to stare. You could touch too if you wanted, he said with a sly grin and a wink. I gasped at him and threw a small pillow at his head. He laughed at me again and shook his head at me. If only he knew how much I would love to touch that body of his. But I couldn't give in to that, not yet. I'm going to show you around the pack tomorrow, he told me before gently grasping my hand in his. I smiled and nodded to him. I hadn't gotten the chance to really explore my surroundings yet. I let out a loud yawn, and Elijah took that as his cue to reach over and turn off the bedside lamp. As soon as darkness filled the room, I was out, only to be woken up in the middle of the night by my own mind, again. Stupid little girl, the ugly man hissed at me as he slapped me across the face again, sending my small body flying back against a wall. I felt so small, so weak, so frail. I had never felt like that before. Why now? No wonder your mommy and daddy left you to die, the man cackled evilly as he struck me again. No. Mommy and daddy love me. I cried. Mommy and daddy? Huh. My current conscious and my dream state were in conflict. My conscious didn't understand what was going on in my dream or what I was saying. It was as if there were two separate parts of me. No, 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 the man snickered. No little girl who is loved would end up a prisoner in Dark Root. I shot straight up in bed, screaming with tears flooding my face. Elijah woke up immediately and pulled me against his chest in an attempt to comfort me, even though he knew I would object if I had been in my right mind. Shh, shh, it's just a nightmare, Lena, shh, he cooed to me as he rocked me back and forth. Then why does it feel so real? I sobbed. No one had ever seen me this vulnerable, especially not a male. An alpha male, at that. Tell me what's happening in your dreams. Maybe I can help, he requested as he smoothed down my hair and tried to wipe away my tears. In my moment of weakness, I decided to oblige. There's a man. I don't know who he island. He's been in both of my dreams. He beats me and yells at me, I rambled out between sobs. Why did these dreams take such a toll on me? What did he say? Elijah asked as he continued to coo in my ear and stroke my hair. The last dream he just cussed at me and insulted me. This time he was talking about my mother and father, I told him. Lena, you said you don't remember your childhood, correct? He asked me. I nodded. I didn't remember anything from before I was 10 years old. Most people would find that frightening, but it was a part of my life that I just accepted. Maybe you're having flashbacks, he said softly, as though he was afraid his words would startle me. I would admit, the thought was alarming. But why now? This has never happened before, I told him. I don't know, but maybe it has something to do with finding your mate. Maybe that somehow awoke some repressed memories, he suggested. I sighed and rubbed my eyes, finally beginning to calm down. We'll figure it out together, he whispered before softly kissing my temple. I shivered beneath his kiss. It hadn't been something I was expecting, but it felt surprisingly good and even comforting. Do you know anything about the Dark Root Pack? I asked quietly. Elijah looked confused at my question. Yes, some. Why do you ask? In the dream tonight, the man. He said, if my parents loved me, I wouldn't have ended up a prisoner in Dark Root. I said quietly. The realization was sinking in since Elijah had suggested that these may be flashbacks instead of merely dreams. Elijah's gaze darkened. He must have not liked the thought of his mate being a prisoner. I remember how he acted towards his own men when he found me in his cellar. Interesting, Elijah mumbled. His voice sounded deeper now. What? I asked. He seemed like he was onto something. Polar Moon hasn't always had the best relationship with Dark Root. Alpha Dean and I are now friends, but I can't say the same for our fathers, Elijah admitted. I furrowed my eyebrows at him. Elijah and Alpha Dean's fathers were the Alphas when I was young. I was almost certain I was originally from Polar Moon Pack. All of my features were similar of those from this pack. This area was all that I could remember. What's your earliest memory, Lena? Elijah asked. It was a personal question, but I had put myself in this situation. There was no turning back now. Time to get closer with my mate. Like I said, I don't remember anything before age 10. From age 10 to 16, a woman named Gloria took care of me. She was a rogue, and she associated with one of the less aggressive rogue packs. She cared for me like I was her own daughter, I told him, reminiscing on the past. Gloria was a middle-aged woman when she took care of me. She was very loving, but kind of a badass. She taught me everything I know. I could never remember what pack she told me she was originally from. Do you remember who led your rogue pack? When you were with Gloria? Elijah asked again. I wasn't sure why it mattered. Not really. When I was 14, a young man not much older than me took over. His name was Rhett. I don't remember who the leader was before him, I told him. Elijah nodded. None of this information seemed to stand out to him much at the moment. Well, it looks like I'll be making a phone call to Alpha Dean first thing in the morning, Elijah informed me. I never did get much sleep that night. I dozed off and on several times, but that was the most rest my mind could get. Even Elijah tossed and turned next to me, likely from feeling the discontent of his mate. Although I was still skeptical about this new life of mine, I couldn't help but feel closer to Elijah after last night. Of course, he had been sweet and understanding towards me since day one, but last night he was so helpful. He was truly concerned about my mysterious past and wanted to help. In fact, the first thing he did when he got out of bed this morning was call up Alpha Dean. They had been on the phone for what seemed like hours, but in reality was only about 30 minutes. Elijah had gone to his office to make the call, so I stayed in the kitchen and cooked up a light breakfast while I waited for him to return. My cooking skills were definitely not the best, so I had to stick to frying up bacon and eggs. Those tasks were easy enough for me to handle. While they sizzled on the stove, I rummaged through the refrigerator and found a carton of strawberries. I could certainly wash off some strawberries. Elijah finally returned around the time that I was sliding the bacon and eggs onto 2 plates. He shot me an appreciative smile as he walked over to me and took the plates from my hands. I've got it. Thank you for cooking, he said as he carried the plates over to the kitchen table. He placed each plate on a placemat and motioned for me to come sit. I pulled out my chair and sat down across from Elijah, looking at him nervously as he cut into his eggs. He finally met my gaze and sighed. Alpha Dean and I had a fruitful conversation, but I'll warn you that all of our questions still aren't answered, Elijah explained. Dean did admit that his father kidnapped members of other packs and held them as prisoner. I knew that as well, that's why our fathers don't get along. The intriguing part is that Dean said his father only chose to take certain people. There was always something unique about them in one way or another. I raised an eyebrow at Elijah's information. There sure as hell wasn't anything interesting about me. I'd be the first to admit that you're a beautiful, unique woman. But I just don't know what Dean's father would have wanted with you, Elijah added, scratching his head a bit. Can't Alpha Dean request information from his father about me? I asked. Now I felt desperate for answers. He could, but his father most likely wouldn't remember you by name. They never kept record of the prisoners they took. The only way for him to remember why you were important would be for him to meet you so he could see you again, Elijah answered. I gulped and shook my head. There was no way in hell I could meet a man who may have held me prisoner as a child. My eyes suddenly widened as a new thought hit me. Do you think Alpha Dean's father could be the man in my dream? I asked frantically. I felt my heart begin to race. Elijah shook his head. He quickly finished the remainder of his breakfast and moved to one of the chairs that sat next to me. He was an alpha. He may have demanded you be held prisoner, and he may have even demanded that they treat you terribly, but he wouldn't have taken the time to do those things himself, Elijah assured me as he gently took one of my hands in his. He was right. No alpha would take the time out of their busy schedule to beat their own prisoner. If it's okay with you, I will call Dean back and have them schedule a flight up here. We're hours away from all the other packs, even by airplane, so you'd have all day to prepare, Elijah told me cautiously. I froze. Did I want to meet the man who quite possibly caused me so much harm that I can't even remember my childhood? As terrible as the idea sounded, he was the only one who may have some answers. I assure you Dean's father has mellowed out substantially since Dean took over. My father won't be happy to hear he's in our territory, but I'm the alpha now so he will deal with it. I promise I won't let anything happen to you, Lena, Elijah tried to assure me once again. I think I'm more worried about all of these painful memories flooding my mind if I recognize him, I said softly. It may be the only way we can find out anything about your past, but if you don't want to then I'll respect your wish, Elijah told me. I sighed. There he goes being all sweet and understanding, yet again. Wouldn't a normal alpha have told me I didn't have a choice in the matter? Better yet, wouldn't the average alpha be desperate to figure out what was supposedly so unique about me, so he could use it to benefit himself? I knew Elijah was just as curious about my past as I was, but I felt like he wanted to know about it so he could understand me better and become closer with me. Although I've doubted him time and time again, I refused to believe he had any malicious intent. Okay, let's do it, I said with a sigh. At least I would have several hours to prepare myself and toughen back up. Between this mate bond and these horrid nightmares, I felt I was becoming way too soft. I needed to get my fierce personality back in check so this man would know he couldn't fuck with me. I wasn't a helpless little girl anymore. Elijah smiled and nodded before pulling his cell phone out of his pocket and heading out of the room. I busied myself by cleaning up the dishes I had dirtied for breakfast. I had to keep my mind off of these dark root alphas paying us a visit. Not only was I anxious for personal reasons, but members of dark root are typically quite dark and malicious individuals. I could only imagine their alpha and former alpha would be the epitome of evil. After I cleaned the kitchen I decided to shower up and make myself presentable for our guests, if you could call them that. I wanted to show this fucker that I turned out to be a hot bitch despite what he may have had done to me as a child. I was strong and bold, and I would make sure these men knew that. I knew if these alphas were coming to help, that they came in peace. Especially since Elijah and Dean were somehow friends. I should be grateful for their willingness to help us find information, but my wolf and I couldn't help but to feel defensive. After my shower, I dressed myself in a pair of skin-tight black leather pants, black-heeled booties, and a silver blouse that flowed down to my upper thigh. I let my natural white waves fall around my face and decided to really spend some time on my makeup. With my limited makeup knowledge and experience, I managed to pull off a subtle smoky eye with a smooth line of black eyeliner. I finished off with black mascara and a light foundation and powder. Satisfied with my strong appearance, I exited the bathroom and went off to find Elijah. I was curious as to exactly what time I should expect their arrival. As I rounded the corner into the bedroom, I walked straight into Elijah's chest. He chuckled at me, causing me to look up at him with a frown. "Where are you off to in such a hurry?" he asked, taking in my change in appearance. "I was coming to find you," I replied, pushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Well, you found me," Elijah said with a wink. "Dean and Archie should make an appearance this evening sometime, probably around dinner," Elijah informed me. Archie? I assumed that was Dean's father's name. Not a very intimidating name for the former alpha of Dark Root. "In the meantime, I thought I could spend the day with you." "We could do whatever you like, little love," Elijah said as he hesitantly leaned down and placed a soft kiss on my forehead. He was so sweet. I knew it would only be a matter of time before I completely gave into our mate bond. He was irresistible to look at, and his mannerisms made it even harder to restrain myself. My wolf still didn't understand why I was holding myself back from him at all, but she was a wolf. We didn't see things the same way. "Can we watch TV?" I asked. Elijah laughed at me, and he laughed hard. I scowled at him and crossed my arms against my chest. "Out of all the things we could do, you want to watch TV?" he teased. "Well, it's not like I got to do much of it out in the woods," I retorted. "That's fine with me. I think I can handle an afternoon of TV with my mate," he said with a smile. Taking my hand in his, Elijah led me out of the bedroom and down the hallway to the living room. We sat side by side on his plush couch before he grabbed a black remote and began to flip through the channels on his large, flat-screen TV. "What would you like to watch?" he asked as he looked at me happily. How did I possibly make this man happy? I know I'm too much to deal with. I shrugged. I don't know what's on TV. Put it on something you like, I replied. He nodded and settled for one of the movie channels. I was sure he picked this because he thought I might like it, not because it was his channel of choice. There was some comedy on that I actually found somewhat amusing, although I didn't get all of the references. 22 years as a rogue made me more sheltered to modern life than I would like to admit. What were your days like as a rogue, Lena? Elijah asked curiously. He knew I couldn't tell him anything about my family or childhood, so this was what he resorted to in getting to know me. I shrugged again. I'd hunt mostly, or go for runs. Every now and then I'd go to one of the rogue packs and spend some time with people I knew, or try and help out within the group in any way I could. I enjoyed helping with the sick and injured. Not many rogues have medical experience. I don't either, but I found it easier to help than others. Elijah smiled and nodded, almost as if he was happy to hear I do have a heart beneath my hard exterior. Do you miss it? He asked wearily. Sometimes, yes, it's the only life I've ever known, but I'm really enjoying all of the luxury here, I answered with a smile. What about finding your mate? Did you ever think about that? He asked again. Are we playing 20 questions? I teased. Sure, I thought about it. What wolf doesn't? I just always assumed that I wasn't meant to have a mate, or at least wasn't meant to meet him, since I was a rogue, I explained. I tried to have relationships with a couple guys who were rogues, but it never lasted. I knew they weren't my mate. I decided long ago that I'd rather be on my own than try and force something with someone who wasn't right with me, I admitted further. Elijah's face softened. I could tell he was happy that I was opening up to him, but something was bothering him. Perhaps that I had been with men before him, or just the fact that I had so much doubt in having a mate. He leaned closer to me and bravely rested his palm against my cheek. I swallowed and let out a deep breath as I found myself getting lost in his golden eyes. We were so close that I could literally feel the tug of the mate bond between us. This was the closest we had ever been. Our noses were nearly touching. The sudden need to touch him and feel every inch of his body was excruciating. Our lips slowly got closer, and I was dying to close the gap. What was happening to me? The bond was overwhelming, and he was enchanting. My eyes fluttered closed. Oh no, what was I doing? I crashed my lips against Elijah's, and he instantly brought his other hand up to grasp the back of my head. His kiss was intoxicating, and for a moment I didn't understand why I had resisted him this long. He softly, but eagerly, moved his lips against mine before pausing for a moment to gently bite at my lower lip. I let out an uncontrollable moan that I wasn't expecting. What was this man doing to me? Before we could get too carried away, a low buzzing sound interrupted us. Elijah groaned and pulled away, reaching into his pocket to answer his phone. I looked up and noticed there was a new movie playing on TV now, and it was dark outside. How long had we been talking and kissing? Alpha Dean and his father are here. We need to go greet them and meet with them in the parlor room downstairs, Elijah said, his tone sounding more serious than normal. I assumed he was nervous for me. Although our mating ritual was not anywhere near completion, I now felt closer to Elijah than I could have imagined. That moment between us may have just changed our relationship for the better because I now felt eager to spend more time with this beautiful man I called my mate. Elijah gently held my hand as he walked me downstairs to the parlor. Several pack members greeted us as they passed, and we nodded in acknowledgement. I'm surprised I hadn't scared anyone off after my moment with Kyla at the pack dinner. We soon rounded the corner into the parlor room to see two men with jet black hair and tan skin seated on a sofa by the fireplace. One man was visibly older as he had silver streaks running through his black hair and his body was littered with both wrinkles and scars. The other was much younger and very attractive in a sadistic sort of way. Tattoos covered his body, and he had one eye that was gray-blue while the other was hazel. I knew this was Alpha Dean and his father, Archie. The two men stood in respect as we entered the room, and then sat back down as Elijah nodded to them. We then took a seat on the sofa across from them. "Welcome, Dean, Archibald," Elijah greeted. "Archibald. Now that definitely sounds more fit for an alpha than Archie. Thank you for the invite, old friend. This must be the mate you've informed me of," Dean spoke. His voice was deep and eerie. I didn't see how Elijah could possibly be friends with this man. "Yes, this is Lena, my mate," Elijah said, introducing me since I couldn't manage to untie my own damn tongue. "Pleasure to meet you both," I managed to say. I made sure my voice didn't falter. I could show no signs of weakness in front of these two. "We have reason to believe Lena may have been one of your prisoners when she was a child, Archibald. What we don't know is why," Elijah explained. Archie's face contorted into a sinister grin. "Ah, yes, Lena," he spoke for the first time. His voice was rough. "Yes, I recognize you, pup," he added with a deep chuckle, yet he didn't seem amused. "You're the healer." My first reaction was to be furious that this man dared to call me pup, but his other words quickly caught my attention. "What did you just say?" I asked, perhaps a bit too forward. "I said, you're a healer. Quite valuable, you are. That's why I just couldn't allow my nemesis here to have you in his pack," Archie said, referring to Elijah's father. Elijah and I both stared at Archie and Dean with our eyebrows furrowed. Elijah did seem to know some of what they were speaking of, but I was completely baffled. I had always enjoyed taking care of the sick and wounded in the rogue packs, but I didn't have any magical powers that would make me rare and valuable. What did being a healer really mean? "I think you may need to explain a bit further," Elijah said, clearing his throat and nodding towards me. He knew I didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. "Healers are rare and powerful amongst our species. They have very special abilities, but it takes some practice and training to bring them to the surface and master them. Most healers aren't aware of what they are until they're put in a desperate situation," Alpha Dean explained. I didn't miss the fact that he wouldn't look me in the eye or address me. I was a rogue and hadn't been officially made Luna yet, so he refused to show respect for me. It pissed me off, but even I knew Alpha Dean wasn't someone you wanted to fuck with. I obviously haven't been made aware of my own powers, so what can healers typically do? I asked. The question was directed towards either man since Alpha Dean seemed to dislike me. "Well, they can heal the sick and mend even the worst wounds, of course. With practice, many can alter moods and feelings. Some of the most advanced healers can bring back the dead and put themselves into another's mind," Archie explained enthusiastically. He truly must have lightened up with age, as Elijah had said, because I knew he wouldn't be talking to me directly otherwise. "How would she go about activating her abilities?" Elijah asked. "Some meditate and focus hard. Others seek the assistance of a witch or fellow healer. Unfortunately, she's the only werewolf healer that we know to exist today," Alpha Dean replied. I huffed in response to his tone. "Very well," Elijah said lowly. He must have not known how else to respond at this point. "I know a witch, perhaps she could help me," I suggested. "A witch? How do you know a witch?" Elijah asked curiously. "From one of the rogue packs I ran with. She stayed with us most of the time. Her name is Sophia," I told him. "Alright then, I guess we will need to locate Sophia within the next few days, if that's what you wish," Elijah said, pressing his lips softly to my temple. "I suppose we've helped all we can," Alpha Dean spoke up, directing his words to Elijah. "Actually, I have another question," I interjected. "Where are my parents?" Alpha Dean's face remained stern as he restrained himself from glaring at me. If he glared, he would be acknowledging my presence. I knew he wouldn't dare. Who knows? If they came to Darkroot searching for you, then they're likely dead or imprisoned. If they became rogues to look for you, then you would know better than I," Archie replied. I let out a sigh of frustration. My parents were most likely dead, just as I always assumed. I couldn't remember them, so there was nothing to miss, but doesn't everyone yearn to know their family? We have to check the pack records to see if we could figure out who they are, I said to Elijah, turning my attention to only him. Of course, Lena, he replied immediately with a soft smile. In fact, I'd appreciate it if you'd take a census of your prisoners, just to be certain, Elijah said to Alpha Dean. For you, friend, Alpha Dean said simply and nodded. That man really pissed me off. I wish that I was already officially the Luna just so I could kick his ass. Beta Eli soon entered the room to escort Dean and Archie to their guest suites for the night. The two would be staying the night in the pack house and heading back to their own pack sometime tomorrow. Elijah and I immediately headed for his office where all of the pack records were kept. After we pulled out the files that would be the most helpful, we were joined by Daphne, followed by Beta Eli and his mate, Scarlet. We each spread out across Elijah's office and made ourselves comfortable so we could effectively sort through all the census, birth, and death records that the pack possessed. I learned a lot about many pack members that I didn't even know. In fact, I learned that Moretti was an extremely common last name in this pack. The surname was spelled in different variations, so we couldn't be sure which spelling was actually linked to my family. Actually, we couldn't be sure that was my last name at all. I have not come across one Lena in the entire pack, regardless of last name. Not one. Daphne shrieked in frustration a couple hours into our search. Calm down and keep looking, Daphne. Separate any files that may seem significant, Elijah said, shooting his sister a warning glare. After another hour of sorting through files, I saw Beta Eli freeze out of the corner of my eye. Lena. He mumbled, staring intently at the papers in his hands. What if Lena isn't your birth name? What if your name was shortened, kind of like a nickname, at some point in your life, and that's all you can remember? Eli asked me. What did you find, Eli? Elijah asked, dropping the files he had at his desk. Lena Moretti, age 4. And you're 2 years older, right, Elijah? This census record correlates to your parents when you were 6, Eli explained. Elijah sprung up from his chair and approached Eli to quickly grab the document from his hands. Iris and Frederick Moretti, Elijah whispered, reading the words off the piece of paper he held. I jumped up and ran over to Elijah, snatching the paper from his hands to examine it for myself. I read over the same details he had read out loud before reaching scan in copies of their driver's licenses. Iris Moretti. 28 years old. Blonde hair, hazel eyes. Frederick Moretti. 31 years old. White hair, blue eyes. I froze as I read the details and examined the low-quality photos scanned onto the page. Iris's expression in her photo seemed bold and fierce, much like I imagined mine would seem, yet it was Frederick's features appeared to mimic my own. This had to be them. I knew it. I could feel it. This is them, I said loudly. Elijah nodded without hesitation. Let's collect all of the records we have on Iris and Frederick Moretti, he demanded. Selena. Was my real name Selena? Something about it seemed so familiar. Selena, my Lena, you're a queen, ah my dear. No fear, you are loved my dear. Selena, you're so beautiful, my love. Lena, you were sent from heaven, above. My whole body froze as the flashback overtook my mind. My body began to tremble, so I immediately reached back for the sofa behind me and pulled myself onto it. My change in demeanor didn't go unnoticed by Elijah. He quickly dropped his files and stood up to come over to me. What's the matter? He asked softly as he brushed a strand of hair out of my face. It's them, that's me. I saw it. I know it is. I told him, my voice gradually increasing in volume. I was struggling to hold back my tears. I believe you, Elijah murmured to me as he quickly pulled me against his chest. I didn't try to resist, he was the only comfort I had. Has anyone found anything? Elijah spoke up. Alpha Elijah, Scarlet started softly as she held up a paper in her hand. Frederick was your father's beta, originally, Scarlet said hesitantly. As Scarlet finished, Daphne seemed to have found something important as well. She sat in a chair in the corner, nodding eagerly. This file shows that Frederick and his mate, Iris, were approved for a travel permit around the time that Lena would have been 5. Father was forced to strip Frederick of his title as beta and replace him in order for them to leave, but they're still officially members of Polar Moon. They were never marked as rogues because they applied for travel permits, Daphne explained. I gasped. Had I once been of beta blood? Why would my parents give up their ranks just to travel? Were they searching for me? Surely if a beta's child had disappeared, there would be some kind of documentation, right? Daphne asked. Yes, we should have documentation on any missing pack members. It has to be around here somewhere, Elijah replied as he began to rummage through the drawers of a file cabinet. Elijah finally paused when his eyes landed on a thick, red file. He yanked it out of the drawer and carried it over to the rest of us as we now sat gathered around a coffee table. These are all of the missing persons reports from when my father was Alpha, he told us as he opened the file and began to pull out the papers. It certainly seemed like a lot of people had gone missing, but with rogue relations not being the best back then and Archie being the Alpha of Dark Root, disappearances must have been more common. After several minutes of flipping through papers, Elijah pulled out the one we had all been looking for. Missing person, April 22. Lena Moretti, age 5. Lena Moretti was reported as missing by her mother, Iris Moretti, at approximately 11 a.m. on April 22. Iris Moretti reports that the child's father, Frederick Moretti, was at work during the time of the child's disappearance. Father, Beta Frederick Moretti. Iris Moretti reports, Lena Moretti was outside playing while Iris did laundry and prepared lunch inside. No evidence was left behind. Alpha Elijah Perrin ordered a search party to spread out approximately 20 miles around the perimeter of Polar Moon Pack. I had to stop reading. I had read enough. A weird feeling suddenly came over me, almost as if this somehow seemed familiar. The strangest feeling of all was love. My parents did love me. The entire pack had looked for me when I disappeared. The man from my dreams was wrong. I was loved. We need to speak with my father, Elijah said. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. I had been kidnapped from my own pack and ended up a prisoner in Dark Root. My parents were still missing because of me. I had to either find them, or find out what happened to them.